Hello and welcome to 35 Vinute Movies. This is the podcast where we're going to go through all of Vin Diesel's career and review and rank it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to have a great time. This week is a very exciting week. We finally start the Fast and Furious movies. And as always, I'm joined by the Brian to my Dom. It's Awais. How's it going?
It's going good, man. How are you? That's a really, really good comparison there. I was like, it's Vin related as well. Love
Exactly,
it.
yeah.
Also, I'm not over 35 Vinute Movies as a name. Anytime you say it, I'm like, it just works so well. It's like we were 35 minute movies, Vinute Movies. We were meant to do this podcast. It was meant to be.
We're never going to find. We're going to do another a speciality podcast in the future, and we're never going to find something that fits as well as this.
Literally, we bit off more than we can chew right at the beginning.
There's no way we can find something that goes with our normal podcast name. Will it ever return as a normal podcast at this point? Does that even happen? Who knows?
Can we top a Vin Diesel podcast?
I don't think you can. If you go back to a news and reviews podcast, really, what are you, it's not happening. It can't happen. Action-packed week this week.
Yes.
Two of his most iconic movies, Pitch Black and The Fast and the Furious. You excited to talk about them?
Yeah, I am. It's funny sort of watching these two films, and at the time, I can imagine people probably didn't expect them to be the start of massive franchises, and obviously we have the sort of benefit of hindsight because we know how both the Fast and Furious and Riddick franchises have turned out to be, and they're both gigantic and still going. And yeah, it's so interesting sort of revisiting how both of them began, and also in the same year as well.
Yeah, very close to each other. It's surprising how many iconic movies this man can pump out early on in his career. So let's start with Pitch Black, directed by David Twohy and came out in 2000. What are we thinking about this film?
It's good. So basically the story follows, it's like a commercial transport ship, and its crew are basically stranded on a planet after it crashes, and this planet is full of these sort of bloodthirsty alien creatures that only come out at night or in the dark. And that's fine and all until the planet goes into a month-long eclipse. And the only way they can get out is by trusting one of the passengers aboard this transport ship, who is a wanted murderer and killer. They're the same thing. Riddick, played by Vin Diesel, and he has these sort of. You find out he's got this because he can see in the dark, and you find out that the reason for that is because he was put in prison, and he was told that he would never see the light again. So he had this special sort of surgery to make his eyes sort of glassy, so that he could see in the dark, so that no one would sort of get the jump on him in prison. And now it's basically he's having to guide this ship of passengers to safety.
So the planet that they crash land on has 3 suns, and I just want to talk a bit about the first hour of the movie, which is just completely blinding. They color graded it so that it's either blue or really heavy orange, and or
white. There's a sequence that's white as well.
Yeah, it's just completely blinding, and I don't know if you still have your eyesight, but I definitely have reduced eyesight after that. But yeah, as a film though, it's very, very 2000. It's very over the top. The action sequences. There's lots of. Was it this film that has? Because I'm getting them mixed up with Fast and Furious in my head. Is this film? He's got random moments of slow motion, or There's loads of random moments of slow motion. There's random sped up bits. It's just feels very Zack Snyder-y.
It does, yeah. It feels very reminiscent to Alien, in its sort of vibes, and we sort of found out as we were sort of researching this film. This film is actually based on David Towie's unused idea for Alien 3, which involved a space prison. That obviously never happened because Alien 3 ended up being directed by David Fincher, so he ended up making Pitch Black instead. And there's definitely a lot of Alien vibes to it, even as far as the creature's design goes, I thought.
Yeah, the design, I was definitely thinking, oh, like Alien, Xenomorph, that's definitely like not even a callback, just a direct sort of rip-off in a way. It makes a lot of sense. Because Alien 3 is the one that's set in a prison ship, isn't it? That is, or something like that. That's the one with bald Sigourney Weaver. Yes,
it is.
Yeah,
I haven't seen Alien 3 because I was advised to stop after Aliens.
I watched a very, very long time ago, but this makes a lot of sense, like in terms of the way that it did end up going. I don't know if it would have worked better as an Alien movie. It does feel very over the top and very just sort of. Do you think this film would have worked better if they lent more into the horror, like vibe from it?
Maybe. It's interesting you bring that up because I was actually just about to ask you what you thought of Riddick, because he's such a vital part of this story, and obviously you don't really have a Riddick type in the Alien franchise because he is essentially the main character of this, but he's also, this savage monster, and in that sense he's like such a big part of the story of Pitch Black. And I was wondering what you think of his involvement in the story.
I think he's a very interesting kind of like character, like, but not like just like as an idea. I don't think they kind of go to the full extent they really could have, and I'm hoping there's 2 other films. I'm hoping they kind of go more in depth of like Riddick, but he just didn't seem very like I didn't get on with it, and it was tough to kind of follow him almost because he was too mysterious at some point. He was very much like too mysterious. But I was thinking about the fact I read that he was a woman in the early drafts of the script. So obviously that connects back to Alien 3 because they must have been planning to make Sigourney Weaver's character,
Sigourney Weaver,
as the murderous killer almost, which would have been very strange. But I'm interested to see where they take Riddick now, because he's someone that could do lots of different things, and I don't know, like where they'll go with it, but more murderous adventures would be quite fun.
He's a really fun character. He's like so interesting because he is clearly violent and psychotic. And he has so many great one-liners. He just, like, in the middle of, like, a really intense scene where everyone's terrified, he'll just turn around and be like, oh, are you scared of the dark? Or, I'm trying to think of some of the other one-liners he has, but he just has a lot of, like, great lines in sort of, like, really stressful moments. And he's clearly got this really sort of fun personality and this fascinating character trait of being able to see in the dark. And they don't explore it enough, I think, and I am curious to see where the sequels go, because you do sort of, in typical Vin Diesel fashion, you do sort of get hints that Riddick's not a bad guy, but you don't see the full extent of that in Pitch Black, and so I'm curious to see now what the sequels would do with that.
Yeah. I just think I think he lacked something for me that, like, it just didn't really fit him very well, if that makes sense. Just in some of the
I know what you mean.
The whole bit at the beginning where he was sort of like just sort of stalking them, like, and sort of playing about with them before the horror kicks off like an hour in. I thought that was stronger than the stuff where he had to be like the leader almost and get them through like.
I agree.
The very long night, but I just want to talk about another fun fact that you've written down in the chat here, that Vin Diesel dislocated his shoulder for one of the stunts in the movie. Like, could you tell me more about that? Because that sounds insane.
There's a scene in the movie where he's sort of tied he's sort of got his hands behind his back and he's like cuffed to this pole, and he just sort of does this weird sort of shoulder dislocation stunt to break free of it. So it turns out Vin Diesel actually performed that stunt for the crew, holding a chain between his hands, except the only thing is he couldn't do it with the cuffs on. So the version we see in the film is mostly practical. It's him doing that, but the special effects are sort of adding the cuffs into that scene. But he sort of went through this shoulder dislocation stunt, which is just so Vin Diesel, I think.
Speaking of so Vin Diesel, where are you? What are your opinions on the character overall as a Vin Diesel archetype character? Do you think we're close to peak Vin Diesel here, or
no?
No. Okay.
I think we might get there, because we've got two other films where he is. I mean, those films are called Riddick. I believe it's the Chronicles of Riddick and Riddick.
Yeah.
So you know he's going to be front and center in those, and we're definitely going to get to see a lot more of his character. Whereas in this, I feel like we didn't get to explore that enough. I agree with you. The first half of this is better when he's just sort of being creepy and stalking them, which is not really Vin Diesel-y at all, and that's why I liked it, because he is sort of unsettling, and disturbing, and he has a presence that you're just sort of like unsure about. And I wouldn't say that's very Vin Diesel-y, in sort of what we've defined as the Vin Diesel archetype. What about you?
I think there's a little bit there. I don't think it's completely there. I would argue that the idea of him being a bad guy that is actually kind of good in the end is sort of, it spawns off stuff like Strays that we've spoken about, where he's not all bad. It spawns off, we're about to talk about the Fast and the Furious, where he is this sort of mysterious bad guy at the beginning, but you kind of grow to love him and he becomes part of like the main group of heroes. But yeah, it's not completely there, because he's badass, but he's not badass in the way you think about Vin Diesel. He's more ninja than hit your head.
He's not a hero. He's not a hero in this.
He's an anti-hero. He's like he has to, you know what I mean? He's like, he's not a hero, but he still has to be a sort of hero-y.
I guess, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he still sort of semi-saves all those, like some folk from like that woman at the end. He saves, doesn't he? I'm almost completely forgotten how this movie ends. He flies off on a ship at the end.
He almost does just leave the group. But then he sort of comes back and sort of swallows his pride to sort of help them out. But so curiously enough, actually, I feel like I've not asked you what you actually think of the film itself. Like, what did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I was going to enjoy it, which was upsetting. I kind of was holding it higher than I really should have. It's a good sort of. It's a fun time, but not. Yeah. It's not engaging. It's not. There's loads of weird choices and direction, and just like I said, the slow motion, and it's very of the time. You know what I mean? The color grading was all over the place at the beginning. I get that was to show the three suns, but you're like, oh, I don't know. But it was all right. I would give it like a 2 or a 3. I'm not quite sure where I'd set it, but it's somewhere on that region. What were you?
I enjoyed it. Didn't love it. I think it is a bit of a mess from a directorial standpoint, and I admire what they were trying to do, but I don't think it always worked. And I just think, I mean, we're sort of struggling to remember the characters' names, bar Riddick.
Who, by the way,
his full name is Richard B. Riddick, and I don't know why, but I really love that. I love that his character is just technically called Richard.
He's a Richard, just like Vin Diesel's actually a Mark.
Exactly. It's a fun time. There's some cool. It's cool. Yeah. But it's not great. I would probably give it a 3 out of 5. I would say.
I think I'll stick with a 2. I think that's where I'll sit with it. I did really want to love this movie, but it just was not for me, I guess. I'm hoping I'll like the other ones. I think there is potential for it to be really enjoyable, but yeah, I just didn't vibe with it. But you know, if you did, come and attack me. It's fine. Just come
I mean, it's you know, it's that's the fun of it. It's interesting to see Pitch Black compared to some of the other films we've already talked about, because it is so different, and he is clearly, you can tell in that sort of early stage of his career, he was going for all these very different projects, and I have to say I admire that craft, because he's picking roles that, while they're similar, they are at the same time different, because he's done what? He's done like a war film, now a sort of sci-fi horror, an animation. We're going to see him do, I don't even know how you would describe Fast and Furious, like a car thriller. Yeah, so if that was the Alien ripoff, then what we're talking about next is the Point Break ripoff, the Fast and the Furious. And I know that we're obviously both big fans of this franchise, but curiously, I don't think I've ever actually spoken to you about the original one. And I'm wondering, what did you think of it?
The original's not one that I go back to often. I have to say, if I want to rewatch a Fast and Furious movie, I'm rewatching one of the later ones. I'm rewatching like 7, Fate of the Furious, 5 or 4. I don't go for the original trilogy all that often. And I have to say, I did enjoy this a lot more than I remember enjoying it the first time I saw it. I've only seen this like a couple times, if that. And it's not one that I don't want to pick out. That being said, what a movie. what a ride, you know? It's clearly very much a Point Break ripoff in the fact that it's a undercover cop, played by Paul Walker, who goes to just investigate these like random truck hijackings that they're carrying valuable goods that are just VHS players and cameras and stuff. Like, it's very, very odd loot, I guess, that I didn't really think was a loot. And he has to like almost shadow Vin Diesel's Dominic Toretto and figure out what's going on in this world of car races and VHS stealing. I don't know. It's it's a weird film, but it's a great time. I know you're a massive fan of this, and you were texting me last night saying how much you remember, like how much you love this film. So please just gush to me how much you love this film.
Yeah, well, no, it's interesting because similarly to you, it wasn't ever the one I'd revisit. And even in the past when I have revisited it, as sort of like full franchise marathon watches, I've always been like, it's good, you know, I've always enjoyed it. But man, I was watching it again last night, and I was so there for it. Like, it was always a fun time. But I think last night I just properly just let myself go to the Fast and the Furious. And it's such a treat. It's like, it's so much fun. It's so much fun. There's it's the sort of undercover cop that ends up becoming quite close to this group and realizes actually maybe he doesn't want them to be the criminals, and sort of as the audience you're hoping maybe they're not, they are. And then you're sort of
very blatantly obvious they are.
It's very obvious that they are. And then it's sort of that moral battle of like, they're bad, but maybe they're not that bad.
Maybe they're the family. Maybe they're family, you know?
By the way, funny you mentioned family. I thought that was, obviously now everyone knows it's the sort of theme of the Fast films. I thought it was a theme that sort of became apparent in the later films, but there's actually a line about family in this one, where Brian's like, oh, maybe it's not, when he's like speaking to the other cops, and he's like, maybe it's not Dom's not our guy, maybe it's these other, you know, this other sort of gang of street racers, and the guy's like, oh, you only get one family, so pick yours. And I was like, oh, interesting. It was there right at the
Starting
start.
off early. Yeah.
Yeah.
See where Dom had adopted the whole family mantra thing. It's you can see the seeds being sown almost of like the over the top nature.
Yeah.
Like people go like, oh, how did it get from street racing to like missiles and stuff? It was the only natural progression because they started it at like a 7 and they've had to like completely just throw the dial up. We're at like a 20 now at this point. You know, we're heading to space, I think, at some point. It's
Apparently, yeah.
Because they start off. There's very little like street racing. It was never a street racing movie. This was always an over the top action movie. Like it was crazy stuff. Some of the sequences in this movie, the one kind of street race standout where Ja Rule, one of like the rappers that gets like a cameo in this movie, where where the woman's like, you get me if you win, and you also get her too. And then there's a point where he gets overtaken in the race and he goes, no, and like properly breaks down because he lost. And then obviously he doesn't get the woman. That is so funny. But that entire race sequence with like the little onboard computers from like the early 2000s and like, oh my.
The NOS tanks.
Yes. NOS isn't real, is it? That can't be like a real. I don't know anything about cars. There's no like. Is that just not like a thing?
Cars either,
it's like a thing, is it?
I have no idea. But I love that sequence because Brian loses and he loses this. We find out it's like an $80,000 car, and he's still so happy because he's like, "Dude, I almost had you." And I was like, well, "You just lost an 80 grand car. How are you happy right now?" And that's where we get the iconic line, "It doesn't matter if you win by an inch or a mile. Winning's winning." It's great.
It's such an iconic movie in terms of just like the setup of the franchise, the over the top action sequence, like the over the top title sequence with the whole like Fast and the Furious that starts the movie, the truck stuff where they're like firing grappling hooks into the truck to steal some DVD players. It's just insane. It's great. But Vin Diesel overall as a character in this, again, starts off very mysterious, like in Pitch Black, you know. Don't know a lot about him. He's just sort of sitting in his little office writing some wee notes down. And then he comes out and he's like, family, you know. He's just having a great time. What do you think about Vin Diesel in this?
He's great, man. I mean, Dominic Toretto is the character we know Vin for. And I was sort of speaking to other people just generally about Vin Diesel roles in the past week. As you do. And I was just chatting to some of our like press pals, and I was like, "Oh, which sort of Vin Diesel films have you seen?" And everyone was like, "Oh, Fast and Furious, just Fast and Furious and the Avengers." But like even then, he's obviously more known for Dominic Toretto than like Groot. It's the sort of pinnacle of his career, and this is the sort of great introduction to, because sort of unlike Pitch Black where we don't really get to know Riddick by the end, I feel like we do get to know Dominic by the end. And we do see that transformation from sort of outlaw to actually decent guy who just cares about his family. It's like towards the end when, you know, he knows Brian's a cop and he knows that Brian's after him, but his only concern is finding Jesse and making sure that he's safe. And also it's just completely random. I love that line. Very early on, Vince is fighting Brian and Dom breaks it up and he just turns around and shouts he does his hand thing and he's like, "You embarrass me." It's such a Vin Diesel line, man. It's great.
What's a standout Vin moment for me is the daggers he gives Brian when he calls to go, "Hey, we've got like we've got like a emergency. We need an ambulance here." Like we're basically revealing he's a cop to him.
Yeah, and he goes, "It's Officer Brian." Yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, the pure daggers that guy like gives to Brian is just insane. You know, it's just like, what a guy.
It's great.
He could rip. He looks like he wants to just completely rip him like in half. Like he probably could as well. The muscles on that man now. You know, we're getting to the point where Vin Diesel's getting quite
big,
quite muscly now. You know, he's getting big. and he could have ripped him in half easily. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he broke a stuntman's nose on this film.
I just want to know how that happened. I read that as well. Where the hell did that? Like, what point could he have broken someone's nose? Just in a fight scene, or?
I imagine it was probably a fight scene, but I'm trying to think. He doesn't have many fight scenes. Vin.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, where could he have broken a stuntman's nose?
Who knows? But the just the cars is. You're not a cars guy. I'm not a cars guy. We're not here for the cars, but some of them are over the top as well. Like the build up to Dom's like iconic car in this. You know, like that's some build up for the Charger. You know, he's like, oh, I don't touch that car. It's not my car to drive. And he's like, gets that out at the end. Flies down the road. It's great time, you know. It's there's something about this movie that's just very special, you know. And we sound like such simps for Fast and Furious right now, but it's something, you know. Overall, what are you thinking about this movie? Is like, just to sum it up, where are we at?
You know, had you spoken to me a week ago, I would have said it's a good movie. I enjoy it. 3 out of 5, but I think because of the context of the other movies, like Fast and Furious doesn't exist as a single movie, it exists as a franchise. And the fact that this kicked it off, and the fact that this is, even back in 2001, still very much a Fast and the Furious movie as we know it today, I love it. And I have to go 4 out of 5 for it.
Wow. Okay. Right.
I have to go there. It's great.
That's a big one. That's I would go for a 3, just personally. I mean, I love the movie, but I'm gonna let the side down here. I'm going to say a 3 because it's not the greatest movie on the planet, you know. And for me to go 4 and give it like a higher rating than like the same rating as Iron Giant or the same rating, just one below Saving Private Ryan, I think I'd be doing a disservice to those movies. So I'm gonna have to go for a 3.
Which is completely valid, yeah. So what do you give it as a Vin performance?
I don't know if we're there yet. Do you know? I don't know if we're slightly at the Dom. We're not quite at the dominance.
We're not peak Dom yet.
No, but I'm tempted to go 4 because the groundwork is there. You know, for a iconic Dom performance. Yeah, I think I'll go for a 4. I think I will go for a 4. And yeah, I think 4. I don't know what you're feeling about Vin though.
I would probably give it a 3. Okay. Because I feel like you're right. It's not peak Dom, and I don't even think Dom's necessarily the focus of this movie. And he's a fascinating character in this, and we do sort of start to see the shades of Fast 4, Fast 5 Dominic Toretto, but I think we're not quite there, and I think he ramps it up definitely in the later films. So I feel like for that reason, and sort of knowing where that trajectory is going to go, I feel like I have to give this a 3 in comparison.
You said there was some pretty interesting trivia for this movie. Just before we move on to the next part, what? Because I don't know much about like the ongoings behind the film, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, for starters, we almost had a completely different cast. Mark Wahlberg, Christian Bale, and Eminem were all very close to signing on to play Brian O'Connor, which is obviously the role now that is synonymous with Paul Walker. And as well as that, Natalie Portman and Sarah Michelle Gellar were the first picks for Mia, who is obviously now played by Jordana Brewster.
I'm very curious about the version of this movie that exists in a parallel universe where Eminem plays Brian. You know, that would have been that'd have been something else. You know,
I think Paul is perfect for the role, though. I can't imagine Christian Bale in a Fast and Furious movie.
No, I don't think he would have done it. where they would have to have recast him like a couple films in. There's no way he would have done a sequel or anything like
He
that.
would have, he wouldn't have stayed.
No.
So also Vin Diesel and Michelle Rodriguez, who date in the film, they were also dating off screen at the time as well, which I find sort of fascinating.
I knew that. I think I knew that through like a random Facebook video where he mentioned it once, where they were like, "Oh, we're talking about Fast and Furious 8 ideas and stuff. What do you want us to do in the next film?" And he was like, "Here's my ex, Michelle Rodriguez." I'm like, "Oh, okay,
interesting." Yeah,
I see.
Also, this film was directed by Rob Cohen, and there's that scene where they've just had their barbecue and they're all watching a movie, and Brian's cleaning the dishes with Mia. So the movie that they're watching is another Rob Cohen film.
What movie?
I forget the name of it, and it's I seem to have lost the bit of trivia, but it's it's a Rob Cohen film, which I think is so funny.
So this week's rankings, we don't have to do. There's no dueling scores this week, like there has been in previous weeks. So we're talking in third. Fast and Furious has gone into third place. So in the rest, okay. So it's between Boiler Room with 13 points and Saving Private Ryan with 15 points. I'm pretty okay with that. I think third place in the list is a relatively good place for it to be. I don't know where it'll end up in the end, but Strays stays number one, which is still very interesting to me that that's managed to stay at number one for all this time. And right down at the bottom this week, Pitch Black.
Oh no!
Yeah, which comes in just below Iron Giant as the worst overall Vin Diesel-ness movie of all time, which is weird because the Iron Giant should be much higher, but obviously he's not really playing a Vin Diesel character in that, so we can't give it a much higher rating, which is sad,
so
the way it works.
Yeah, it's just worth remembering that our like total scores are our sort of quality of the film plus the sort of Vin Diesel-ness of the film. So that gives us each a rating out of 10, and we just add them together. And that's sort of how we determine our list.
Yeah, and it's going to be a very interesting list by the end of it. I've got what would you place bets on that's going to be at the top that is probably the best overall and best Vin Diesel movie that we both probably agree on? Like, what do you think is going to end up at the top?
I have a feeling it'll be one of the later Fast and Furiouses, and I don't want to say this with too much confidence, but I have a feeling it might be Fast 5.
I was thinking the exact same thing, because I think that is my favorite Fast and Furious movie, and it's most
my favorite
Fast and Furious,
and it's yeah. I also see a Guardians film being up there.
Really, that'd be interesting. I think
we'll have
Guardians
to save our
films
discussions for that.
Might rate lower into the like maybe middle-ish, because Groot, you got to think about where Groot places as a character. So we'll have to see where that goes. So that's us. I feel like that's us already. It feels like this time's flown by this week, but that's us. I think we're at the end.
We're just talking about Vin Diesel, and we can go for hours.
we could. I mean, we could go for days. You know.
Yeah.
Next week, the Knockaround Guys. I've never heard of this film before in my entire life. And what was the other one? It was Knockaround
Triple
Guys.
X.
And Triple X. So that's going to be
another famous one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big over the top action movie. So we'll have to see how that pans out. I've been Cameron. You can find me on Twitter at CamsOG and ohifilms.com. I do another podcast called Four Eyes and the Giant, where we talk about sort of just generic nerdy stuff. It's a topic of the week. It's great fun. Me and my friend Jordy do that. What about you? Where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Awais, or I'm occasionally posting reviews at www.thefilmbite.com. And you should definitely go there in June if Fast 9 is indeed going to be one of the first films back. I'm sure I will cover it.
Yeah, I hope you do, and I hope we get to cover it together with a lovely Vin Diesel interview. Who knows? One day.
Who knows?
Who
knows?
Please, please.